Is misunderstanding surrender keeping you stuck? Are you wondering if you are lazy for not taking forceful spiritual action sometimes? Today we examine a deeply relevant question, one that pierces to the heart of the spiritual seeker's greatest tension. That apparent contradiction between surrender and laziness or passivity, and the tensions and struggles it generates in the life of every spiritual seeker, is as old as humanity. It isn't just a conceptual dilemma. It's an embodied struggle felt in the bones of anyone walking the path, regardless of stage and age. In this video, I will present a simple and usable framework to guide you through this paradox, turning confusion into clarity and resistance into wisdom. First, let us examine the core contradiction and why it feels impossible to easily grasp the core meanings within these concepts. We will begin by defining these terms so we are on the same page as we progress. Surrender in spiritual terms means active trust, an open-hearted alignment with life/God/the universe. It means releasing rigid control while remaining fully present and responsive. Laziness or passivity, on the other hand, is the avoidance of all action and responsibility, a collapse into inertia, often fueled by fear, numbness, unbelief, partial belief, or resignation. With these definitions, you would think that there is no controversy or contradiction, as each meaning defines two very different states of being. Unfortunately, this clarity on paper is still a hazy one in daily practice and usage. And in the realm of practice, not in the realm of theory, is where this contradiction often torments the mind of the seeker. The dilemma often confronting the zealous seeker is, if I surrender, won't I become passive? And if I act, am I not forcing my will and showing mistrust of the divine process? This creates spiritual analysis paralysis. Seekers end up talking surrender while, on the one hand, secretly striving to effect the change they seek by their own means and methods. Or, on the other hand, they freeze altogether, do nothing, and prepare ready excuses to blame divine wisdom for not keeping to its own side of the bargain. Yes, some folks see it as an actual bargain, rather unfortunately but understandably. In any case, now that the point has been made, let's break down why. There are 5 human quirks, characters and peculiarities that have been fingered as creating this struggle. Fortunately, each of them contains a pivot for growth and transformation embedded in it. If only we can shine the light of awareness on them. These quirks are just aspects of being human and are so subtle and apparently harmless as to be overlooked and not taken seriously by the untrained eye when seeking ways to overcome this struggle. But guess what? That is the very reason their influence runs so deep and holds so much sway. They feel so familiar and innocuous that very few ever spot the barriers they place in the path of the seeker, let alone try to remove them. And the first is the productivity trap. It is sheer human nature to equate our sense of worth with output. Modern culture glorifies doing, making non-doing feel like failure. This creates a situation of struggle in the mind of the seeker who wishes to infuse surrender in his affairs. This is because surrender triggers guilt and makes them appear as if they are lazy for not working to produce the results they desire. How can we use this productivity trap as a pivot for growth? The first step is distinguishing work from busyness. True surrender to being means full engagement with the present. For example, watching a sunset, listening deeply, feeling grief, mowing the lawn, helping others, practicing your vocation, all without a personal agenda. The financial reward or output which the world judges work by is a secondary consideration in your mind. This is true work, the kind that will produce lasting results because divine energy, not ego, is infused in it. Contrast it with busyness, a robotic set of activities that lack feeling and immersion. More like going through the motions, always with an eye on the reward, not the quality of work. Its main characteristic is an unfeeling engagement. This is laziness. Laziness avoids feeling. Surrender meets feeling. And feeling, dear friend, is the difference between ordinary and extraordinary output in any activity. Which would you rather choose? So when you surrender, you are actually being more productive because you are not scattered in your distribution of energy or effort. Energy is allotted to truly productive actions, not to every available or beckoning option. Nor is your activity driven by fear and uncertainty. It is powered by an energy that sees the entire picture, and energy is meticulously allotted to truly productive channels using a wisdom far beyond the limitations of your eyes. A wisdom that will attract just the right finishing to bless the intention and intensity of your surrender and focused engagement. Watch our video of quantum creation and be reminded that the universe works smart, not hard. Link in the description. Quirk number 2 is trauma's disguise. This quirk fuels the surrender/laziness dilemma by capitalizing on any unhealed trauma. Coping with unhealed trauma, in terms of productivity and progress, expresses itself in two possible forms. It can appear as hypervigilance, or what some call over-efforting, making the individual work extra hard to compensate for lost output, using his carnal and limited mind and resources. Or as collapse, which is also called learned helplessness, in which case the unhealed trauma produces an individual too crushed to even try again. One who now decides to hide behind his perception of surrender to get through life. Both expressions mimic so-called spiritual states and masquerade as legitimate responses to past trauma. But these expressions are faulty in their foundation and can't carry the seeker too far. And this leads to a dilemma. The underlying struggle here is that the traumatized self mistakenly labels giving up as surrender, and overworking is mistakenly labeled as an act of sacrificial devotion that honors divine wisdom. But neither of them actually do. This is the trauma disguise, and it fools the seeker into a state of either thoughtless, persistent, self-sacrificing labor, or, conversely, they give up and begin to devote all their time to activities that they, rightly or wrongly, deem to be spiritual, believing that these can be used to cajole creation into producing results. In short, they no longer tend the farm but spend the whole day fasting and praying. Sooner or later, both options end in despair and low or incommensurate productivity, leaving the seeker, who felt quite spiritual all along, wondering why the laws don't work for them. How do you pivot out of this illusion? First, you have to honor the body's wisdom. It is not how hard, but how methodically you work. If you're frozen or frantic, pause. Don't go into overactivity just like that. Pause, take a deep breath and ask, is this reaction based on fear or trust? Don't go into numb and lazy surrender just like that either. What you need is proper relaxed trauma identification and integration. This was just an event and not your life. Trauma integration precedes mature surrender, and mature surrender then reveals how to work smart instead of working hard, just like the universe intended. The third quirk is the ego's hijack of surrender for its own purposes. It does this, not by antagonizing spiritual concepts head-on. That would be too obvious. It rather chooses the indirect method of cajoling and co-opting them to maintain control. This quirk works hand in glove with the second quirk. But here, the full leaning is into laziness and passivity, with a twist of blackmailing of divine intelligence as an icing on this cake. Surrender then becomes a bypass to avoid responsibility. The ego deploys and recycles phrases like, "I surrendered, so why do I still need to fix my marriage, pay debts, face pain, and so on? God will handle it." The thing to remember here is in the first pivot point. True surrender is taking aligned responsibility without attachment to the timings, means, and ways by which the outcome will emerge. Act as if everything depends on you. Trust as if everything depends on God. Do your part, then release the outcome. This way, the relevant particles, persons, and circumstances are pooled together by divine intelligence to effect your rescue, not by this intellectually dubious definition of surrender, but by the genuine act of surrender that occurs during your dispassionate work of repair. With no insistence on your part as to how these problems must be solved, you allow the universe to comb through its limitless resource base of both human and material assets and pull them into your space to miraculously solve the problems, Your actions, when done with true surrender, are a very powerful magnetic prayer. They signify childlike faith, not childish faith. Know that, and know peace. Quirk number 4 is quite common amongst those who adhere to Oriental religions. There is an emphasis put on calming the inner mind as a prerequisite for meaningful growth. This is justified in the main, but can sometimes be taken too far. Case in point is the frequent confusing of the Taoist Buddhist precept of non-doing with passivity. There is a dilemma in the mind of the adherent between forcing effort, which is rightly interpreted as ego, but the opposite of this, which is no effort, is also a recipe for stagnation. That is the struggle, and the question the adherent struggles with is, where's the balance? Well, here's the answer, and the simple point of pivot and transformation. You must align action with the current of life for maximum and least energy-sapping productivity. It means wise aligned action that requires minimal energy expense to realize great results. Like a sailor adjusting his sails to the wind, hard work becomes effortless when it flows with reality, not against it. Laziness ignores the wind, gives up, and stays at home risking hunger. Surrender uses the same wind to set sail effortlessly to fishing grounds and comes back with a boatload of fish, using about 10% human energy and 90% divine assistance. Quirk number 5 is the opposite of quirk number 3. Here, the deceit of the untrained ego is that time is wasted waiting for divine assistance. We want spiritual results on our schedule. Surrender feels like waiting. Laziness feels like wasting time. The unresolved struggles in the seeker's mind are, if I surrender, when will breakthroughs happen? The pivot point in this scenario is one known by farmers since time began. The alchemy is to practice active waiting. Tend the inner garden while trusting. Seeds grow underground even while you are asleep, and we are truly powerless over the divine law of seasons. Laziness abandons the garden. Surrender tends it without digging up seeds to check. These are the 5 ways our frail human nature stands as stumbling blocks to our understanding of the divine concept of surrender, creating a fear-based conflict between it and laziness. 2 important things bear repetition here. The first is that these barriers are like glass ceilings, often unseen but possessing great powers. Don't underestimate them and their power to either cause or perpetuate your spiritual and other forms of stagnation. The second important point is that all these points of pivot and transformative tips can be used in combination. And that makes sense because these quirks and mind mechanisms don't occur in isolated pockets. All of them may be operating singly or in combination in the same single individual, necessitating a multi-directional approach to overcoming their restrictive influences. Today you have seen them for what they are, and whenever they rise to challenge your faith, you will respond that you are grounded, not lazy, not disaligned, that your desires are clearly mapped out. Your heart has seen them happen already in the quantum realms. Now your hands are just going through the motions, putting the stones together to raise the edifice on earth that has already been raised in heaven. No more dithering in doubt, ambivalence, or uncertainty. You choose true surrender, backed by alignment in action, and there is nothing to debate henceforth. You are home and free. If you enjoyed this simple and understandable breakdown of a knotty subject, kindly like and share. Remember to stay connected by subscribing so you can be the first to get our videos. Until next time, remain blessed and renewed on all levels. Bye-bye.